Hello, dear friends. So, just as we're coming towards the close of 2025, we have something to look forward to 2026. It's a year of new beginnings. But there's something for us to discuss, and let's do it together. In fact, recently there was an amazing topic that sparked a lot of interest, even with TED Talks, and that's about how do we preserve being uniquely human. Being uniquely human has got a lot to being our unique selves. It's just that. So how do we preserve being uniquely human? And I have a lot of inspiration to draw from the Japanese art of living, a lot of phrases, a lot of insights to draw from a few topics, one, two, three, and I will conclude it as well. So, why do I see myself as a great fit in terms of addressing a topic that really did spark a great interest? I see myself as a great fit simply because of the bumpy rides along the way in this river of life, and I was happy to know that I'm not the only one who feels the same. You may have felt extremely stuck in a particular circumstance, you may have felt the pinch of having to cut the cloth according to the cut, you may have really struggled with a change in your circumstances, but you really didn't know how to deal with the change. So, as a return to work mom, the greatest challenge and the greatest threat I've encountered was feeling sidelined either because you're overqualified or underqualified or just out of touch for so long. So, whilst on a sabbatical caregiving break, and while I witnessed my tiny tots bloom through the rise and fall of their baby tooth, it was necessary for me to simultaneously be career resilient and take the necessary steps that's adequate enough for me to hold ground. And I had to break certain icy cold glass ceilings so that it was possible for me to engage in a normal way and gain a level of normalcy, and with no barriers or restrictions in terms of being able to create more value, communicate effectively, and participate so as to feel included and not secluded. Well, coming back to this topic from TED Talk that really does spark a lot of interest, they're also interested in navigating a lot of ideas, right? So, how do we really preserve being our unique selves? How do we preserve being uniquely human when there's such a lot of severe disruptors? Life quakes, which doesn't feel like it's a piece of cake, and a lot of disruptors, severe disruption. How do we preserve being uniquely human, right? Well, as a humanist with a lot of zeal, I'm inclined to vouch for the human element, and I don't see it otherwise. It is a human element in organizations and homes that actually clicks, and it is the human element that ticks. And what better option to preserve being uniquely human, no matter how hostile the circumstance, how indifferent the circumstance. So I'd like to first draw some inspiration from the Japanese art of living and a few lovely concepts. For example, ikigai. So what's your ikigai? Ikigai is really your reason for being, and it's your purpose. So your ikigai could simply be a hobby or what you'd love to do, a daily ritual or a sacred dot or a connecting factor that helps you to stay well balanced or fulfilled, whether or not it is profitable or even visible to others. So ikigai is not necessarily about big achievements or phenomenal success in your career as much as it's about a cause that you really care about, something that you're really passionate about, and something for which you're really walking the talk in terms of due diligence. Or it could simply mean sipping a nice cup of tea and watching the early sunrise, or some daily meditation measures that you take to feel well balanced. But ikigo iki is yet another term which means one time, one encounter. Every moment is unique, and it's a moment that matters. So ikigo iki tells us that this is the only time they're going to witness this moment. So live it fully and let me feel it fully. And hence, we are then ready for yet another concept, which is Shikata Ganai. Shikata Ganai, it simply means it cannot be helped because there are many things that's beyond your control, and it's about being able to accept the fact that it's okay. right? There are things that's beyond your control. So, in Japanese culture, fostering a resilient mindset is by way of being able to maintain dignity and composure in the face of hardships, a lot of animosity, hostility, a lot of untoward circumstances, and staying grounded in your purpose and meeting your hurdles step by step with grace and by overcoming limiting beliefs. So, this is a lifesaver in being able to preserve being uniquely human, and it's the acceptance of it is what it is. No use fighting what cannot be changed and beyond our control. Breathe, accept it, pause, and move forward. And you can soar high above the high tides, because there ain't any tides that cannot be ridden, that can be ridden, that cannot be ridden and not be turned, right? So it may be bendable but not breakable. And then we also come across Kaizen. Kaizen is Kai means change or modify, and Zen mean good or virtuous, right? So Kaizen is that continuous improvement process, making small, consistent steps that accumulate into significant changes, right? So it's a continuous improvement process. Now, this also could be followed by wabi sabi. It simply means beauty in imperfections, in anything that's flawed or which doesn't last for too long. It could be, anything, anything which doesn't last, nothing finished and perfect or complete, and that's okay. It's okay if it isn't perfect. It's okay the way it is. In fact, wabi sabi could mean finding beauty on even a weathered wooden table, scratched and tarnished by the ravages of time, but you still can feel the warmth from the years of shared meals. It could also be a faded, blurred photograph that carries a memorable story, and it is that story of a moment that really matters. So, yes, there are many such beautiful concepts, positive reinforcements to help you maintain being your unique self. However, you have to recondition your mind in order to be able to preserve being uniquely human. So, as a humanist, as I said, I would vouch for the human element, and it is the human element in organizations and homes that actually click, and it is the human element that ticks. And I would also draw some insights now from a few points like building a nurturing environment, right? So, building a nurturing environment is even beyond just building a team, right? Team building could be a process which is beyond just Belbin team role models and team effectiveness. Could be beyond stages of growth in the process of team building, which is forming, storming into existence, norming, which is a deliberate process wherein the team matures into growing out of their differences and potential disagreements and develop a kind of cohesiveness and cohesion that adds incredible value to team effectiveness, followed by performing, and that's possible with a clear, structured approach and working towards a shared common goal. Hence, just like how there is a nurturing environment that proves to be vital within a corporal entity, the same nurturing process and nurturing environment is applicable within homes that aren't built only out of brick and stones, or it's not built of augmented gaming realities alone, just to keep us preoccupied with everything that deters or hinders the natural process of dreaming and allowing for the wings of imagination to just cross borders beyond boundaries of dimensions of human thought and time. So this is how we sprinkle a pinch of salt in essence that symbolizes a spark of vitality to preserve being uniquely human. It's our uniquely human self. It's about being uniquely human. It's about preserving our unique selves. And as we delve deeper, we see the soar model, which allows us to soar above the high tides and the soreness of our souls if you're having a harrowing experience. And it starts with S, which is your unique self, and that unique self is a combination of attitudes, aspirations, attributes, preferences, priorities, and more importantly, our unique characteristics that's embedded in our DNA. But our outlook, SOAR, SO, Our outlook is based on our unique values, value-based systems, sacred thoughts that keeps us alive, and more importantly, the choices that shape our lives and our destiny. It could be a haphazard journey. We could have had a lot of hairpin curves, but it wasn't meant to break us as much as we utilize this opportunity to build us, right? And then action and reflection, the SOAR model, is about being able, it's something that enables us to gear up towards a recharge, reinvent, and rewire our shared goals and objectives and values by reconditioning our minds to push beyond limiting beliefs, right? So there could be a shift in our perspectives, values, behavioral values, systems. So the third point is about capturing ideas during the nurturing and bonding stages of growth so that it becomes living legacies. There could be examples at home, work, and school. In school, you may have come across experiences where you break stereotypes and you work on your own pace, and then you see that you're able to create results. At the same time, at home, I would share my zeal when it comes to school activities, even socially useful and productive activities, even if it means creating value out of scrap. And it could also mean, thinking about the muck on the ocean floor to which humanoids could be deployed to clear and convert it into reusable matter, right? So being uniquely human, to conclude, actually means being able to preserve the human element by building a nurturing environment compliant to team building if it's within an organization, but the same is applicable at homes where a nurturing environment really helps, such that, where the wings of imagination are not tied down by heavy expectations, and there's an ambiance wherein it's possible to preserve the human element, the real human self, the possibility of being really uniquely unique. So being uniquely human also demands freedom and dignity of life, free from shackles of oppression and suppression and depression, and it's possible to soar and glide above the high tides, which may be weighing us down depending on what kind of a scenario that we are in. And being uniquely human is also about going the extra mile to capture ideas that become living legacies, right? Because these are sort of interventions that tend to be innovative, but this is from, our creative ideas, and and that's why we say necessity is the mother of invention, right? Also, it will do us very well as we round up this conversation if we were to dwell on a few key concepts, from the principles of adaptive leadership that was first coined by Ronald Heifetz. He is a clinical instructor, an academician, an author, and he has very rightly termed, given us some exposure into some strong foundational principles based on adaptive leadership practices, which is about distinguishing between the adaptive versus the technical part of the challenge or the problem that we're facing by trying to identify the pattern of the problem, trying to get down to the root cause. Well, that might require some new learning, technical learning, versus adaptive ones, which might require a higher level of expertise for us to understand how do we cope with this situation, right? And it is a scenario wherein everybody requires some exposure, some mentoring in order to know how to cope with a circumstance like a disruptor, that we've never felt before. And then the second point, the second concept is about get to the dance floor and just don't be seated on the balcony. It simply means get to the dance floor and feel firsthand, the level of complexity, the pattern of the problem or the resistance to the change. So feel it firsthand, get to the dance floor, and then mobilizing people is about engaging stakeholders to do the work of change rather than imposing, and demonstrating a visible level of leadership, in terms of finding solutions, interacting, trying to get onto innovative interventions and trying to build more trust. And even building trust and managing conflicts is about navigating disagreements constructively and allowing us to profitably utilize it while orchestrating a conflict. And it boils down to diagnostic tools and frameworks to understand stakeholder perspectives, power dynamics, and value-based systems. I will also cite an example of a young lady who felt like as if she was booed by her teacher, who couldn't see beyond a fat young lady at one point in time in terms of what she could accomplish. But down the lane, she turned out to be stronger than a mustard seed, whose stature and not size spoke for itself, because she commanded such beautiful presence on the screen like none other. And that was a unique differentiator. So it's about high time that we look forward to having a change in our, shift in our perspectives, a change in our mindset, foster a resilient mindset. We don't know exactly what we are going to encounter the next moment or how do we do so. The solution may not be obvious, and it might require pushing beyond limiting beliefs in order to go the extra mile and foster a resilient mindset. And hence, we might be able to preserve being uniquely human, and that's our unique selves. Thank you for your time.